There's an Owl in the Shower. Chapter 1, A Good Owl. Borden Watson braked his bike and jumped off. He wheeled it across the narrow logging road and into the dark forest. Leaning it against a tree, he took his rifle from its carrier and put a bullet in the chamber. A cool green silence wrapped around him. He breathed deeply, then stepped onto the needle-carpeted ground and walked a soundless distance. Ankle deep in ferns and wildflowers, he stopped in a grove of trees. The trees were so enormous that one alone, standing in the middle of a logging road, could block trucks in 2 directions. Borden was in the old-growth forest of the Pacific Coast in Northern California, a land blessed with abundant rain and sun, a temperate climate, and deep soils. He did not see this wild wealth. He was in the old-growth forest for one purpose: to shoot owls, spotted owls. He hated them. His eyes cruised up the trunk of an enormous Douglas fir. They peered past the large low branches, up past a floral burst of limbs where a pine siskin cheeped, and on up to a cluster of needles 200 feet above the forest floor. Just below the needle spray was a large nest of sticks. He grinned. "You," he said aloud, "you owl in that nest, you're dead the minute you stick your head up." It was almost twilight, and the owl, Borden reasoned, should be awake and ready to go out hunting. He thought about his father, and he cried out, "My dad doesn't have a job because of you. He can't cut any more big trees because of you." Shouting seemed to help the pain Borden had felt since his father had lost his job with the lumber company. His father had told him that a judge had stopped all sale of the trees on public lands in the Northwest until the United States Forest Service could come up with a plan to save the spotted owl. It lived in the old-growth forests, and the forests were being cut down for lumber. The gentle owl was on the brink of extinction. The government, it seemed to Borden, liked owls better than people. Borden thought about this and grew angrier. "He's the best tree cutter from here north through Canada to Alaska," he shouted to the bird in the next nest hole. "He can put a giant tree down right on the earth without hitting a single tree around it. He can do that." He lifted his rifle. He had more to say. "He's the best of the cutters, and the cutters are the most important people in the whole lumber business. And their work is very, very dangerous. Limbs in trees can fall and kill or injure them. They have to be smart people." He paused, and then he went on. "My pop is famous. He won the National Tree Cutters Award." He smiled pridefully, and then remembered. "But because of you, he can't work." Borden caught his breath and thought about what he had just said. He did not understand why a little owl could stop honest, hard-working men like his father from cutting down trees, but it had happened. Now his father was out of work, and it was painful for the whole Watson family. His mother had been forced to take a job in the school cafeteria. Borden had mowed lawns to help, but that was in the summer. Through the winter and into late spring, he too was out of work. Sally, his older sister with her pale blue eyes and bush of red stringy curls, was also upset. She had stopped playing soccer with her friends, and every day except Tuesdays came home right after school. She would go to her room and close the door. She wouldn't talk about spotted owls when Borden and his father ranted against them. Borden suspected she was embarrassed that Pop didn't have a job. She didn't need to be. She could be angry, maybe, but not embarrassed. Many fathers were out of work in the lumber town of Fresta. Stores had closed, and businesses and lumber companies had failed. Almost everyone was suffering, but that did not seem to matter to Sally. She went on soothing her hurt behind her closed door. Borden did not criticize her. He understood why she felt as she did. Their father was Leon Watson, big, noisy, protective. They thought nothing could happen to him, but it had, and that was very upsetting. A hero had been felled by a measly little bird. All spring, Borden thought up plans to get his father's job back. None were any good. He just didn't understand why an owl could stop a man like his pop from cutting down trees. When Judge Kramer came down the street on his way to the post office one school morning, Borden caught up to him and put the question to him. "There's a law," said the impeccably dressed judge, adjusting his tie. "It's called the Endangered Species Act. It states that no one can destroy threatened and endangered creatures or the habitats they live in. If they do, they will be fined, put in jail, or both." He looked at Borden. "Our northern spotted owl is a threatened species. He can only live in old-growth forests and nests in big, tall trees. When we cut them down, he dies." Borden thought about that. Judge Kramer continued, "The problem is this. The agencies that take care of our public lands, the United States Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, violated the nation's environmental laws. They permitted lumber companies to cut recklessly and too fast. The owls are being wiped off the face of the earth. Mountainsides are eroding. A judge in Seattle ordered all timber sales, and therefore cutting, to stop until there was a workable plan to save the owl." "We're going to save the owl, not the people?" Borden asked. "The owl is telling the people we aren't managing our forests right. Save the owl, and you save the people too. We need forests." His heel tapped the sidewalk like the tick of a clock. "In some places in Washington state, only 6 pairs of spotted owls remain on 6 million acres of old growth that were cut in the past. That's trouble for the owls and trouble for us." "Can't the owls move?" "They can't. When the big trees are gone, the owls will die." "But Pop's company leaves some big trees for the owls." "They're too far apart. The owls can't hear each other, and if they can't hear each other, they can't find each other. If they can't find each other, they can't mate. And if they can't mate, no more owls." Borden frowned. "It's a terrible thing no matter how you look at it," Judge Kramer said. "Cut the trees, and the owls become extinct. Stop felling them, and the cutters become extinct," said Borden. "And that's terrible." For the next week, Borden put his mind once more to solving the problem of owls, trees, and cutters. To think more clearly, he rode his bike out to the Trinity River after school and climbed up on his favorite rock. He decided the lumber companies should cut the trees anyways. Once trees were down, no one could put them back up, so the mills might as well sell them. Then he remembered that Judge Kramer had said anyone who destroyed the homeland of a threatened species would be fined or put in jail. And then he thought again. The next day he was biking through a little flower-filled park in the middle of town when he braked to a stop. A spotted owl hung by its neck from a lamppost. "Now there's a good owl," he said. Borden saw what must be done. It was that simple. He headed out for the mountains.